Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Hello and welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and with me as always, my friend and co-host, Chris Boruff.
Screw you, Harold.
Okay, and joining me as well, my other friend and co-host, Zach Bowers.
The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle in your snout.
Alrighty. As we are wrapping up our spooky story theme, what you will find here on the Movie Trap is that we typically get one of the hosts you just met picks a theme, and then we all watch a movie based off that theme. And then once we've watched all three movies, whoever movie we then vote on which one was our favorite, and whoever wins usually gets to pick the next theme. But that is not happening this time because this theme was chosen by a completely random roll, and we are doing movies that are based in or around Halloween, and whoever wins the vote, which is happening today, gets to pick a bonus movie before we get back into it. And we are also going to be announcing at the tail end of this our Christmas episode, which should be
our next one after this, probably.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking. And then we'll also get Zach's bonus movie, and then we will get on to regular business with the movies that have been previously adapted by authors of Zach's picks with Shawshank Redemption. That is what's on the docket later on. But today we've got an action-packed filled episode filled with votes and movies and more movies. So before we get on to what we're doing today, which is 2019's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, to wrap up our Halloween-themed basically show here. So at the end of this, we will vote, and then whoever wins will get to pick the bonus movie. So with that in mind, we've got points. So Chris Boruff, you have 11 points at this point for final voting with 2 bonus points to give out. I have 11 points for final voting with no more bonus points to give out. And Zach, you have 2 bonus points to give out with 13 points for final voting. Zach, as always, nailing it with the points. Okay, so Zach, go ahead and tell us what we are dealing with 2019 Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark of Chris Boruff's pick. I should mention, this is Chris Boruff's pick. We previously did Trick or Treat, and then before that we did Monster House. So here we are with Scary Stories in the Dark, Chris Boruff's pick.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a 2019 horror children's-ish film directed by Andre Orvidal. Overdahl, he's Swedish or something, so I don't know. It's based on the compilation of children's stories of the same name by Alvin Schwartz, though it is worth noting that the most important attribute lended to this movie is perhaps not the stories themselves, but the illustrations from the original editions by Stephen Gamble. If you know them, you know them. They made a new version a few years ago that took out all the illustrations, and it's like, what are you doing? Those illustrations scared many children and are beloved by many. The screenplay was adapted by somebody named the Hodgman brothers, and Guillermo del Toro served as producer. Got a few stars in here: Zoe Colletti, who's a young person, Michael Garza, who's a young person, and a few other young persons, as well as Dean Norris.
Hank from Breaking Bad. Yeah.
Yes, Hank from Breaking Bad. The movie takes place in 1968. Vietnam is a-ragin'. LBJ is president, etc. The election is coming up. I think, is this the one? I think Nixon might have won. Yeah, Nixon's on the
around
verge.
The corner.
Yep, the specter of Nixon haunts every frame of the film. It's Halloween. These group of kids are living in Pennsylvania, in a little teeny tiny small Halloween town, as these Halloween movies tend to take place in, Midwest, sleepy town. That's where a Halloween movie's got to take place. 3 friends named Stella, Augie, and Chuck are still in the Halloween spirit, getting a little old for it and all that stuff, but, still doing their best. But at the same time, they're being tortured by local town bully Tommy Milner. After deciding to get a little revenge on Tommy on Halloween night and throwing some eggs at his car, not realizing the window was open, and is it Augie's sister Ruth? Is also on a date with him.
Yeah.
Chuck's sister.
It's Chuck's sister, yeah.
Chuck's sister is in there on a date with Tommy. Tommy goes what I sometimes call Stephen King bully, which is when you have a small town bully who is fully willing to commit murder, and chases them down. He eventually tracks them to a local drive-in movie theater, where they jump in the car of a young drifter named Roman Morales, who sort of stands up to the bully and says, "We're in a public place, you can't do shit to me." All the people and the people who own the drive-in are like, "You got to get back to your car and get out," and they are temporarily safe. As it is Halloween night, the spookiest of nights, they decide to go to the local haunted house, which belonged to a family named the Bellows, a wealthy family, and has been long since abandoned because many years ago, many of the children of the town started to die, and it is widely believed that the daughter, Sarah Bellows, was in fact a witch who was killing the children via witchy witchcraft ways before the heat got too much and she committed suicide. So they head inside and begin to see spooky stuff. They see the rooms look new, and they see a woman sitting on the bed, and they find a spooky book. But before they can investigate too long, Tommy finds them and locks them inside, along with the sister. They manage to eventually escape, though Ramon's car is trashed with racial slurs and the like. But they do eventually manage to escape the spooky house, seemingly unscathed. Stella returns home and finds that when she flips through the book, suddenly a new story has appeared on a previously blank page called Harold, about an evil scarecrow. Meanwhile, at Tommy's home, Tommy returns home drunk, and his angry mother says that he needs to deliver the milk to the neighbors because he had not done it before earlier in the night. Tommy reluctantly, angrily proceeds to cross through the cornfield, kicking the family scarecrow, who he makes a point of always kicking, named Harold. But soon the scarecrow comes to life and begins to stalk him before stabbing him with a pitchfork. But instead of bleeding, Tommy begins to shoot hay out of his mouth and wounds and starts to transform. Tommy is reported missing. And after hearing this, the kids, specifically Stella and Ramon, go to investigate because, Tommy had been the name of the character in the story she saw appear last night. And they find Harold, but now he's wearing Tommy's jacket. And Stella believes that Tommy has been transformed into the grotesque scarecrow Harold. Shortly thereafter, they witness as the book begins to write a new story on the fly called The Big Toe, being written seemingly in blood as they watch. The main character in this story is Augie, so they desperately reach out to call Augie, who is home alone, his mother looking for something to eat. He says to his mom that he'll eat the stew, and she's like, "I didn't make any stew," and he's like, "Well, someone made stew." So he's going to eat the mystery stew, while his friends try to reach him on their radio, because they're a bunch of quirky kids who have a group of quirky kid radio transmissions. You know what I mean?
Walkie-talkies.
Mm-hmm. and Augie's like, "You're just trying to spook me up. There ain't no such thing as books writing themselves." But they see that the
Augie has some big Boruff energy throughout this entire thing. I just want to say that.
Yeah.
A pretentious clown is his costume. I'm not a clown. Perot is totally different.
So they the story is about someone who makes a big toe into a stew, and then a corpse comes searching for the missing toe. And Augie starts to eat the stew, and sure enough, a big old toe's in there. And he soon hears a call, "Who's got my big toe?" After a short bit of stalking and running around the house, he is dragged under the bed by a, disfigured corpse, never to be seen again. The remaining friends, now believing that this is all very much real, attempt to destroy the book. No avail. Can't destroy curse books. Rule number 1. So they start to look into more information about old Sarah. Meanwhile, Ruth has had a terrible zit pop out over the past couple days, though she believes it to be a spider bite. And indeed, shortly thereafter, in the following day, a new story begins to appear called The Red Spot. And Ruth, as her zit goes monstrously large at school, hides in the bathroom when her zit explodes and hundreds of spiders come out because the spider laid a fucking egg in her face. And they manage to fight off the spiders and rescue Ruth, though she's obviously very scarred by the experience. But it proves that they can indeed save people if they try. They follow the leads to an elderly woman, all the while Chuck talking about a recurring dream he has about a large pale woman chasing him down a red hallway. But they meet an elderly woman named Lulu Baptiste, who is all old and mysterious and barely talks, but manages to relate to them the fact that Sarah actually was hospitalized at some point in the nearby hospital in the mental ward by her brother, Dr. Bellows. And, that there's all kinds of bad stuff around Sarah Bellows and the Bellows family, and it's supernatural and spooky. So naturally, they head to the hospital to try and get any records of her hospitalization, and find a recording. They're heading in the place called the Red Room, which stands for something. It's like RED something, but Chuck is like, "I ain't going in there. My dream happens in a red place." So he goes to a different place. The rest of them find a recording of Sarah Bellows getting electroshock therapy from her brother, who is clearly trying to get her to admit to killing all the kids. But she, between electroshock sessions, is like, "No, it's the mercury from our mill that's killing all the kids." And he's like, "No, that's a lie. Electroshock therapy until you admit it." And so now they know the murderous truth that Sarah was a victim, indeed, in all of this. Meanwhile, Chuck, wandering the halls of this hospital, comes to a red hallway, where soon his dream begins to come to life. He sees a large, pale woman in the distance. He begins to run, but soon she is around every conceivable corner. And he is trapped eventually between two of the pale ladies, and he is absorbed into one of them before she disappears. At this point, Stella and Ramon, unable to save Chuck, are arrested by the police chief, who is also looking for Ramon because he's a draft dodger. Because his brother enlisted and died horribly in Vietnam. Soon Ramon realizes from a weird chant in the police station that the next monster will be the Jangly Man, a creature that throws its pieces down the chimney before assembling itself and attacking you. It's a story he knows from his childhood. The Jangly Man does indeed appear. Unaffected by the sheriff's bullets, he kills him before the two kids manage to escape and run to the Bellows house for answers. Stella is sent back in time as Ramon has to contend with the Jangly Man. Sarah eventually manages to get through to Stella and promises her that if she lets them go, she will write down Sarah's real story and spread it. She will tell the truth of what happened, and begins to write the story in blood in the book of what really happened to Sarah Bellows, and the monsters vanish. It seems like they have struck a deal. Sarah manages to get the story into the papers, and Ramon decides he's got to accept his enlistment and ships out to Vietnam, sharing an emotional goodbye with Stella. And at the end, Ruth recovered. Stella and Ruth resolve to find a way to save Chuck and Augie. And so the story ends until the sequel, which has been announced.
Yeah, apparently. Yep. Apparently they're doing another one.
Yeah, they were going to do one, and it got sort of put on hold because of COVID. It was supposed to happen during COVID. I don't know if they're going to actually do a sequel now, just because all these kids are older. They do not look like children anymore.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been news in recent times. They did announced the sequel was in development in April of 2020 after lockdown had begun, but who knows? They perhaps didn't expect lockdown to go on as long as it did. We shall see.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess we kind of talked about it last episode, but do you guys remember these books when you were kids, the scary story? Because like Zach said, I think the strongest memory I have is of those covers, really. I think that's what brought me to the dance, is why I borrowed it from the library and said, Mom, these look cool. And yeah, that pretty much what drew me to them. And I don't know, they were probably in like Scholastic stuff, that kind of,
Yeah.
pretty...
Yeah, I mean, they were the edgiest thing I was reading at that time, because I was, it was like prior to everyone getting into like Goosebumps and stuff like that I actually never really got into Goosebumps, but it was that sort of window into it. Most of the stories, when you read them now, are very, very simple. They're very short.
They're like collected folk tales. Schwartz didn't originally create almost any of them, or possibly none of them. They're just folk tales he tracked down. He's like a folklorist. He's not a writer by trade, and so he tracked down these stories from some of them from different cultures and from different times, and just collected them together basically, and wrote them very simply and straightforwardly.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I understood it too, is that they are kind of all based off of like these kind of like old fairy tales sort of stuff, which, it kind of shows just of how simple they are. They're all pretty basic, like you take something from a corpse and the corpse comes back, it's
well, I mean, some of them were based off like urban folk tales. Like they had a couple scarier ones that were urban folk tales they didn't actually like adapt in this one, but the one that stood out to me that I think everybody remembers that they did a cover of in this was the spider bite in the face thing. Like almost everybody I know that read those stories remembers the spider in the face thing, because a lot of people have freaky fears of spiders, and most children at that age are dealing with pimples, so it's sort of a universal dread horror that actually like really directly would hit the audience of the kids reading that.
Yeah,
I think the big toe one actually stuck with me.
Oh yeah, that one too.
The idea was that they find this toe in like a field or whatever, and then they decide, what'll be good? Let's put a stew in it. Like let's make a stew out of the toe. That I never understood that, and I still don't. That's what you do, right? You see a toe, you help, but you got a stew going. Must be like during the Ukrainian famine or some shit.
Maybe. It seems like it might be based off like a different story, like a rough transliteration of it, because there's another story called Blood on Satan's Claw, I think, is the film adaptation, but it's about finding a weird foot in a field, digging it up, bringing it back, and then unleashing a curse on everyone in the community. Like the kids in the story start going wild and doing all sorts of bad things.
Well,
anyway, Zach.
Yeah. Well, just still talking about the book. Yeah, one of the ones that does stick out. Like most of them are pretty same as things go, but There's and then like there's stories you'll hear like the Room for One More on the elevator story if you've ever heard that. But also the Harold story sticks out for me a little bit, in part because I do think it's a very good. Gamel's art is good on that one, but it is also one of the more vicious ones because one of the people who abuses Harold is literally skinned, and his skin is hung out to dry in the sun. Like occasionally they got a little grotesque. A lot of them were very, very, very childish, and especially the comedy ones, which are absolutely ridiculous. But
I think that one. I remember that one fondly. The only other one I remember was the one where it's the guy in the middle, where it was like a lady who was on a subway car or something, and these three dudes come on, and it seems like the guy in the middle is super drunk, and the guy in the middle just keeps staring at the lady, and she's like looking down, trying to ignore this person who keeps staring at her. And then one guy gets up and leaves and says, "Take it easy, Harry." And then a couple more stops, the other guy gets up and leaves and says, "Take it easy, Harry," or whatever. And then it's just this lady and the drunk guy who's staring at her. And at the next stop, there's like a jostle. And what happens is the guy falls forward, and you find out that he was dead the whole time. Like he'd been shot. And they were just propping up this dead guy between them the whole time. So I just remember that one being a good like gotcha twist at the end, where it wasn't that he was staring at the lady, it's that he was dead staring at the lady the whole time. I don't know. I always loved that one because it took the premise and then went one step beyond what you were expecting. And I was like, okay, this is a good short story.
Sure, which is almost the opposite of what the other children's book did immediately after with the Goosebumps, where it's like it ends a chapter thinking that something spooky is going to happen, and then you're just like, oh, it was my dog licking my toe or something, That's how every chapter of R.L. Stine's Goosebumps ends. It's just it ends up being like something totally innocuous. But I was gotta say, because like when you proposed this movie, Boruff, I was like, well, it's got to be an anthology then, like it because all of these stories don't really connect at all. So I was really surprised that they really didn't go that route. I mean, they stuck to like some sort of a narrative, and I didn't expect that. I honestly thought that we were just gonna like be like the Midnight Society or whatever, and just like sit around telling ghost stories, because that's what the name of the fucking movie is. It's the scary stories to tell in the dark. So I thought that that's what it was going to be, and it isn't. Not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it was an interesting choice to kind of not make it an anthology.
And it is worth noting that all three of our picks feature kids on Halloween going to check out a haunted place.
Very true.
I always liked this one. It sort of surprised me because I expected this one was going to be real crap when I went to it, because I was expecting a similar thing to what you guys are thinking. But then I was like, okay, Del Toro producing. It's got this, the guy who did Troll Hunters directing it, maybe. Something might be there. And then I went and saw it. I liked the fact that they went extra hard with the story. Like, they really were like, okay, we're going to actually try to tell a story and try to tell something spooky. And it has different levels of success or not success. But it just hit me as interesting that this movie was a period piece about a time period that I don't really think of very much, like the 60s. And it was dealing with racism and all these things that were kind of boomer concerns, if I'm not saying that weirdly, but it just sort of hit me as interesting. I was really kind of refreshed by the fact that it wasn't exactly just somebody in the 90s or somebody in the 80s or something like that. I liked that they had picked an unusual location to set the story.
Why? I kind of wanted to ask you that. Like, what did you guys think of it taking place in 1968 with the backdrop of Vietnam and as Zach said, the shroud of Nixon is coming? What did you? Because I sort of got to the point in my life with movies when they do this, when they kind of transpose it to another place in time, that I almost wish there was a reason for it. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, and I almost. I don't really understand why they chose to do it in 1968, other than the draft dodging, C story with Ramon. Other than that, I didn't really see why they would have it take place in 1968.
I can think of off the cuff, a few of the reasons I can think. Yeah, and obviously, like, there's aesthetic reasons. Okay, there's it avoids the problem of internet and cell phones, which is always a thing for horror movies. And I think they wanted to. So they had this plot. I think maybe they had this thing with Ramon and this racist bully and the Vietnam War. And I don't think they wanted to make it contemporary because I don't think they wanted to feel too political. Because I could see like easily Ramon being an illegal immigrant or something like that, and the bully being racist. But then I think people would be, they'd get like Fox News being like, another liberal agenda movie making fun of the MAGA crowd, all that bullshit.
I was thinking that same thing because it, like when I was watching it, it came out during Trump being president, so I kind of was like, you know, with horror films and horror stories, usually they're a way to talk about something that you're uncomfortable talking about. And usually there's something not quite as direct as this. Like it'll usually be like, you know, fear of commitment, and you're seeing like Alien or something. That's not a real theory. I'm just saying like people have those reasons. But in the idea with this is, you know, people were obviously freaked out by Trump. Like that was an ever-present like fear, and we were afraid we were going to end up in a war and the whole thing. So I think it played more for me in that capacity because it was.
And I guess that makes sense with like Nixon signs and things like that.
It did feel like good to just be like, okay, there was a really bad president before. Maybe we'll make it through okay. So there was that for me. The whole time I was like, oh my God. So it was effective for me in that way. I don't know if it played well for you guys or if you guys even read it that way, but
I mean, I didn't mind it. I sort of didn't quite understand why they would choose it, because like if you wanted to do something, Nick, you could just have it take place in 1972 or even before that, you know, like, or you know, if you wanted to go full blown like Stephen King, have it take place in the early 60s, late 50s kind of thing with, you know, like. So, like, the internet thing I kind of buy, but then you could also have it take place in the 90s, you know, like, before the internet was really a thing. So, I don't know. And then to say that they wanted to avoid, I mean, I guess, you know, draft dodging isn't the political hot topic that it is today, but, I mean, back then to say that, you know, you were a draft dodger was almost a political statement. I mean, like, you were, that's still talking about, you know, kind of heinous politics and stuff. So,
I think, but it could comment like Chris said. I'll give the Chris a point for this Richard Nixon comparison. Even like I think it's a way to talk about the things that are relevant today without just saying, "Well, Trump. It's 2016 and Trump is coming, and these people are racist now." But like you know, they just could make that comparison to. I also think the other reason they might have elected to do this is because when you read scary stories to tell in the dark, right? When they take place, always for me as a kid was, well, when do they take place? They take place in the past. Maybe it was 150 years ago, maybe it was 20 years ago, but it was like the past. And so they might have wanted to retain that aspect of the short stories of like, when was this? It's just a general sense of not now.
Right.
It's a general sense of some years back, some decades back.
I mean, it was the original book was published in 1981, so that would be pretty good. I think that's about 20 years usually for the cycles of nostalgia. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something there, but
maybe it was maybe it's nostalgia, because it's clearly more nostalgia for like Del Toro and stuff, you know, like it's more nostalgic because more than the audience of the books who read the books in the 80s, like their nostalgia is the 80s and the 90s, not 1960s. But to Zach's point, and I think if I had any points to give, I would probably give him one, because I think that's actually a pretty good point. Having it removed in a part of the past that most of millennial generation, who this movie is very much catered to, that's such a mythological time that we have no real context. So keeping it removed kind of keeps that sort of past folklore-ness kind of open, and it's in the past, and it could have, like you said, you know, when did the Sarah Bellows thing happen? Who gives a shit? 18, who cares? Like it matters that these are things that happened a long time ago. So in a way, I guess that makes sense. I just say it didn't seem like, other than the Vietnam stuff, and I think Boruff's probably right that the it was more of a reflection of the contemporary political anxieties that were going on in 2019, and there were quite a few. So I guess I can kind of see. I just thought it was an interesting choice to have it take place in 1968. I sort of thought they just needed. That's the easiest way to get, as Zach said, the Stephen King kind of bully, who is just literally willing to bash your head in, and that's what he's going to do. So
it also it helps him out with the anachronisms that usually come up too.
True,
because you're going back one stage further. Like we mentioned it briefly, but have you either of you seen The Midnight Club?
I have.
Some of it.
Okay. The internet didn't work that way at the time period that show happens. Like everyone jumping on like a computer that didn't have a network card or internet access and just typey. My Apple II is just surfing the web. It's like, no, your Apple II would have a hard time running, I want to say that Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail was what you did, not the internet. So stuff like that. And it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really get in the way of enjoying it, but it's one of those things that I realize I'm now an old man, so I'm seeing technology and going, that isn't how it works. As and stuff from my own childhood.
To bring up. And I kind of, beyond the anachronisms, like that's sort of what kind of did bother me with the Midnight Society. The even though like the books take place in the 90s, I don't understand why they had to. It's not like it added or took away anything other than just the music choices that I haven't heard in 20 years. And to this film's credit, it doesn't do that. It doesn't just randomly throw in like random 60s songs in 1968. You could find some good ones. That's a fucking banger year for music in 1968. So like they didn't awash you with that. It seems like to me they make these movies take place in the time period just because they like the music or the aesthetics of it, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. It just seems like if it's going to take place in the past, I would rather there be some sort of justification for it and not just have it just for the music cue's sake. And this film doesn't do that. I just felt it was, but you guys kind of explained it to me, so I'm kind of with you on that. So one of the things that I was impressed with this movie was that most of the monsters appear to be more practical effects. And that probably was a Del Toro touch, if I had to guess. So I was pretty impressed with how they looked, because like even the Jangly Man was actually like a contortionist who's in like this kind of bodysuit who can do all these crazy sort of moves with their body. And I thought that was pretty impressive. And the Pale Ladies, I don't remember the story that much, but I remember those drawings. So that stuck out, and I was impressed that they did it with practical effects. And in 2019, that ain't bad,
I think that the Pale Lady, I want to say that wasn't the story with her. Like there was no like.
No, it's a different story of some other story.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I remember that drawing though. I mean that.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like they adapt the art very well. Like the art and making the 2D characters look believable as 3D was fascinating. Like the Me Downty Walker guy. Like I remember the head. That whole character design, if I remember correctly, was just a head in a fireplace.
Right.
And that was the entire drawing. So everything else was stuff they just came up with. I mean, I just loved all the art in those. It was like it was the darkest thing that you were allowed to have as a kid that your parents wouldn't take away from you. At least in my experience, being like a 9-year-old reading that.
Sure.
Yeah, my parents were just happy that I was reading it all. They didn't really care. I mean, I remember we'd get in trouble because we'd have to bring books to school, and it would be basically just reprints of Universal monster movies from like the Blob and all that other shit was in there. So I'd bring that, and me and Richard would get in trouble. My mom was, to her credit, was like, "What do you care? They're reading. What difference does it make?"
It's I mean, I definitely think that the creature design is pretty strong on this. They do a good job of bringing those Gamel pictures to life as much as possible, because they are often very surrealist. There's like a lot of like weird roots and vines that like crawl off the page in a way that you almost can't do in real life. But I do think they do a pretty strong job of putting together these practical effects, and they're appreciated. And it is, especially because this was almost, I think it was the same year they revamped the books to cut the Gamel pictures. to be like.
What a crime, right?
Yeah, I think they've gone back.
Okay, good, because I'm sure like the outrage behind that would be like,
well,
what are you doing?
Gamble had kind of an interesting style that, like, AIs tend to be able to trick this a lot now, the different stable diffusion and things like that. I noticed that a lot of times he would have a lot of very wispy details at the edge of the image, the vines you're talking about. But then whenever it was a face, it would be hyper clear line work. So it was like the face would pop out of the page a little bit in this sea of like a background noise. And it just had that sense of like the uncanny valley. Like there was just something off with the faces and the proportions, not because the artist wasn't good at what he was doing, but because the artist was really good at what he was doing. And it was creepy. I love that artwork.
It's so that to me, like when you watch like, you know, like even the original like Hellraiser and stuff, when you have something that is seemingly normal surrounded by the abnormal, it adds such a feeling of off balance that it's hard to match that as far as creating dread. And it's hard to do in movies. You know, Del Toro's pretty good at it. You know, like even though he doesn't do straight horror most of the time, like some of his, like I think Pan's Labyrinth is more or less a fairy tale, but it's got some spooky stuff in it. But his creature design is something kind of, you know, different, and he's not afraid of it. He loves, like, even Hellboy. You know, he stayed true to the art of Margolis and stuff like that, but he's able to. I think we talked about this a long time ago during the Film Concussion days when we did Devil's Backbone, that what he's so good at is making reality seem not real, and then when you add this kind of supernatural stuff to it, it flows seamlessly, but still creates this sense that it should not be. But you have this kind of, like you said, with the clear face, because one of my clearest covers of this story is the guy with the pipe and the red nose, and it's, you know,
that's the front.
That one sticks out to me. And you're right, the face is just kind of clear and white and, you know, kind of not really, but around it there's this kind of macabre growth around it. And it creates a sense that's hard to match as far as creating dread.
Yeah.
Did you guys think anything was spooky?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It did the job as far as giving me the where's my big toe thing that added a few of the spooky ooky stuff. You know, you get to the point with these horror movies, and maybe it's just because we've been watching a lot of them for the season and stuff. Mm-hmm. You get to the point where you know they're coming.
And this is a PG-13 movie that's intended for younger audiences, so it's not going to be fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre in here. It's right. Like, you know, and it's fine for what it is. They do a decent job. I think it's like it's a the story on the whole, like outside of the mini stories, is pretty tried and true, pretty basic, pretty like, you know, Fear Street did something similar last year, which is like, you know, the witch is causing all the trouble, but the witch is falsely accused kind of thing, like, and this is the side effect of that. Like, I don't think that was anything groundbreaking. I think it was pretty tried, pretty straightforward, but it was, as these things go, like, a fine rendition of that story. Like, it's not, I don't think it was exceptionally great, but I think it was okay.
Yeah, and I think it plays by the numbers, right? Like, because as you say, it's meant to try to scare more of the younger side of kids, and they're, you know, when you're, you know, pushing 40, these jump scares, you pretty much see them coming a mile away. You know, you're like, oh, something's coming. So like it's good and it's effective for that, and that's what you kind of have to keep the story kind of pretty basic. You know, like that's sort of like, especially in horror movies, because that one of the things I thought that was so disappointing about the Nia DaCosta's Candyman is that it was so weighted down by this world building and this expository stuff, and even the whole like climax of the movie just kind of fell flat with like the evil villain speech, and it kind of takes away from what I wanted the movie to be. So this movie kind of suffers from that a little bit, but it because it's all about like this book, and they're trying to figure out what the deal is with the book and stuff. So for this one, for keeping the story moving, because the main story is something that's not part of the source material. It's just kind of weaving its way through these pylons, basically, that these short stories create, and the main characters kind of weave their way in and out of them. And again, unexpected for considering what I thought the source material was going to be. I did not expect to. I thought this movie was going to be utter shit. Really, I thought it was going to be not good at all.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
And given that expectation, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought, okay, better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I agree with that. It seems like it worked harder than I thought it needed to, based off what it was going to be. Similar. I think I said this to you guys before. Obviously different, but Paddington didn't need to be awesome, and Paddington 2 didn't need to be 5 times as awesome as Paddington 1. Like, they could have just flowed that thing into theaters and dropped it on us, and it could have been Smurfs. It could have been Alvin and the Chipmunks. No, they went hard.
And it would have made money too. It would have made money either way.
Yep.
But
it might have made more money, honestly.
Yeah. But that's just the thing. It's just like, it always hits me as funny when someone takes kind of trite material and pushes it further and makes it something that you want to watch again, or is, got more meat on that bone than you would have anticipated. I'm not saying Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a classic horror film. I'm not saying
it's no Paddington. It's no Paddington.
Yeah, that's true. I would
Paddington.
say, yeah.
But it's okay. It
is
not bad.
okay.
Yeah.
It is okay. It is not bad. Shannon and I saw this in the theaters. The Del Toro thing. The fact that I had like a remembrance for this when I was a kid. I think I might have gotten early release tickets, like free screening tickets before it came out. At that time, before COVID, the AV Club was based here in Chicago, and they had these contests all the time for like, oh, if you like are one of the first people to like comment on this, you can get free tickets. And semi-regularly at work, I just pop over to the AV Club on the day they did that and see if they have
tickets.
And I got a lot. I got a fair number of like free screenings that way. They don't do that anymore because the AV Club doesn't exist, and it's not centered in Chicago, and most of those people got laid off. But and also COVID. But
also theaters are going under now. They don't give you out free tickets as much. They're like, oh Jesus, please just show up. We'll give you free popcorn. Just pay for a ticket. Yeah.
So but yeah, and we both watched it, and we had the same reaction at the time, which is like, yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Considering, like, when you know how bad it could be, right?
Yeah.
Like when you have a pretty good idea that this could go south very quickly.
We did have some aspiration that, like, because Del Toro was involved, and some of like the recreation of the images was pretty strong at parts. Like, there's individual visual images, like the pale lady in the red room, that are strong, and a lot of that stuff was in the trailer. So we were like, maybe this will be like, pretty like solid. We were like, it could be in like the pretty good movie territory. Instead, it's like B, B-ish, somewhere in that range.
I mean, I'd probably give it more closer to the B- just because
B-, yeah, that seems fair.
I think that because and again, maybe it's because my expectations were so pretty low, even with Del Toro behind it, because it's not like I love it what Del Toro does, and he just produced it. So I mean, he just kind of, but he must have, because like I said, those the practical effects, aren't easy to do these days, and to keep them all in camera, and I know that's a feat in itself. So at least Del Toro's the guy to do that.
Well, he's been like known to be kind of obsessed with these books. When he has that traveling collection from his house, like he has a whole house where he just keeps all of his stuff in it. That is
like most
his
people.
Normal house. Well, no, it's like a separate house just for his collection. His wife was like, "You cannot keep all your crap in this house," because he's kind of a hoarder with this.
Fine, I'll build a house.
Anyway, he built a house, and then enough people wanted to go tour or visit it. He was like, no one can come in, and he just created a road show where it goes out, and it's his stuff in a museum. You can go see it, and there's all sorts of cool stuff in there. But he had a lot of the original Stephen Gammell art up in there. So it was one of those things where years before I knew this was happening, I was like, oh, he's pretty obsessed with this. And then this came out, and I think I had a similar reaction to what Zach was talking about, where I saw he was involved. And I was like, okay, maybe this will be something kind of serious.
Yeah, and you gotta when you've got fanboy love can be a double-edged sword, right? Like if you love the source material that much and you're too loyal to it, then you really are just doing like VHS or another anthology creep show sort of story, right? If you're trying to do what this,
or you're like threatening to kill an actor on Twitter because they're a black person that was cast in the like remake or something. If you, that's one way a fanboy. That's happening. That's constantly happening. I mean, I was thinking of like, what's her? I think her name is Rose Marie, something Marie Tran from.
Yes.
The Last Jedi.
Yeah. There's definitely like, and every time in a superhero movie or whatever, some character is like brown or black instead of white, or like a woman leads a movie. These people lose their fucking shit. And
Black Hobbit. Well, I never, that kind of shit. But see, that's where. But you do. It's not so much they don't need to be fanboy worship to it, but there needs to be some sort of reverence behind it. But you can't let it be in the driver's seat when you're trying to do something to make it successful. Because I think if you did just try to do like a Tales from the Crypt sort of style of movie and just tell the individual stories, I don't think you didn't really need to make it a movie. It didn't really need to be a movie then. This kind of makes it its own movie and its own thing within like the framework of the scary stories to tell in the dark, without being completely tethered to it. Because when you're completely tethered to it, then you end up with like 8-hour Lord of the Rings movies, like it could be taxing. Or
although those movies are extremely beloved.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I know. But the extended versions are what I'm talking about, but at least
no, I mean the extended versions are more beloved, I think, than the theatrical versions.
Yeah, right, because we definitely needed more of the third movie. That being said, I was impressed with the Amazon show, considering it cost $1 billion. It's not bad.
I'm giving Zach a point. Those are beloved movies.
I like the extended versions better than the theatricals. Full stop.
Really? Even the third one? God, it's just.
The thing is I think those ones are good. I can't sit through the Hobbits. I've never sat through all the Hobbit movies. I won't.
Well, they're bad. Those are terrible.
Yeah. But the originals,
we could have a whole discussion
classics.
about. Again, Guillermo del Toro comes into it, but the production of those Hobbit movies, like,
man,
he was supposed to make The Hobbit, and the studio was like, make it more Jackson-like. They were very intruding, and he was like, fuck it, I'm out. If you're not going to let me do what I want to do with this, and they dragged Peter Jackson kicking and screaming into those movies, and the studio just did what they wanted to do with them, and they are not good.
Yeah.
Allegedly, Ian McKellen cried on set because there was so much CGI, and he was like, "Is this what my job is now?"
Yeah, I didn't start acting to do this.
Right, and considering how much the first three movies were so like on location, and they all had a camaraderie. I mean, they basically lived that movie for like 5 years, all three, because they shot them all at once. And that's why, like I said, when you're adapting a source material, like the thing about Lord of the Rings, I mean, that's a meaty shit to get into, and they made the whole Amazon show basically just the appendices of those fucking books. So you can go. It just seems like to me with a story like this, with this source material, that it's so disjointed and just basically Grimm's fairy tales. You can't really make that into a narrative unless you want to do it like an anthology TV show like Del Toro's currently doing. You could do it that way. But if it sounded like they wanted to make this into an actual movie, and it sounded like the original point was to do like an anthology sort of story, and Del Toro was the one who said no, we need to get kids into it, and they're not going to sit through little fucking vignettes. They need to follow something, preferably other children. And I thought pretty bold choice, whether it was successful or not. I think, mixed results, but bold choice. And I admire bold choices for doing something like this. So I gotta hand it to Del Toro. He didn't lean into the punch that clearly the book set him up to lean into. So good job.
Yeah.
That being said, I'll never watch the extended version of Return of the King ever again. That was fucking way too long.
Well, I think we might have actually put a cork on this, guys. We've talked about all the things on it.
Well, let me real quick before. What do you guys think of like a sequel? I mean, like, since this is apparent, we kind of touched it at the beginning. Like, I'm kind of thinking, why? Maybe don't do a sequel. Like,
they could probably make it. I could see them in theory making it about as strong as this movie is, if they did it well.
Yeah, I mean, if they set it in the 70s, like I think it would be more.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting.
They should deal with the kid when he comes back from Nam. Like they should straight up get into PTSD and some intense just things that are way more intense and way more adult than should be applied to this story. Because I can't imagine.
And they could make it a parallel with the kids they pull back from the Nightmare Realm, who also have PTSD.
Yeah, because spoiler warning, Augie. A number of the kids in this movie are just gone. So I'm just like, if they were to bring them back,
which I'll say
like
this:
years in time difference, they're gonna have some problems.
There is there's a lot of like Monster House-esque sort of like, this is kind of between Trick or Treat and Monster House in that way, but like there is like a little bit of like, this is a kids movie energy to this, but there is a harshness to it that pushes it a little bit. And that is like, you'd expect, and I expected, I think the first time I saw this movie, that like, okay, they'll beat her and then all the kids will be fine. But that doesn't happen. Like, they're still gone at the end of the movie. Everybody who died or disappeared or whatever is still, they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
The bully's still the fucking scarecrow carcass,
Mm-hmm. I like how they say they're gonna go look for the friend. Not Billy though. Fuck that guy. Whatever happened to him, he deserved it.
The sheriff too. They didn't bother.
Yeah, right. Yeah, nobody cares about him.
Shout out Gil Bellows, man. The sheriff, Gil Bellows. Like he's been in a couple things. I think he was in another. He was in another horror
how
film.
Low key. I was pretty impressed with how low key the cast was. They didn't draw a lot of attention to themselves. Like it was pretty serviceable for kid actors.
Yeah, Dean Norris is in there. I don't even think I mentioned him in the summary, but he's kind of like a single father to the main character. Their mother, I think, died, and he's like trying his best, but he's also a little bit of a drunk.
Yeah, that B story worked really well for me. It just occurred to me, Gil Bellows, the reason he'll be coming up again is he's in Shawshank Redemption. So when we do Zach's Shawshank Redemption, he's going to be in that.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's the guy who plays the young inmate. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I always get excited when I see Gil Bellows show up and stuff. I don't know why. Anyway.
That's funny. Okay, well, yeah, I guess we could get to our final thoughts and get to voting and handle all the business we need to handle. So I'll go ahead and start with my final thoughts. I pretty much summed it up here, but I when it comes to scary movies that are geared more to, more the teenager stuff, because I'm under the impression that most horror movies are geared to younger audiences. They're, whether or not they want to admit them, young people love scary movies. I know I did when I was a kid, and I didn't care how gory or scary it was. I was a big fan of them. And considering this particular source material is so apparently beloved by people my age and stuff, and I certainly remember them, I thought that the reaction, I mean, it did okay on the box office. It did okay critically, considering that it could have been so badly. So I think that my opinion of the movie is kind of like Nixon, this shroud of this movie's gonna suck, and then thankfully it didn't, unlike Nixon. So like I think for what it's worth, okay, but probably only okay. It would be hard for me to say whether I'd watch it again or not. I'd recommend it. Like, if you're a fan of the books, you'd probably enjoy it. But even if you don't really need the books, like Mike said, my memory of these books is very, very many drunken and drug-filled nights away. So, like, my memory of these is totally shot. So you don't really need it. But if you do have an affinity for them, I do think you'll be pleasantly surprised that they don't try to just lift straight from the books and try to jumble a story around it. They kind of kept to a story and kind of injected the books in for the menace when they could, rather than just trying to keep that as their spinal cord and then they just fill in the blanks with regular plot, which they could have done, and they didn't. So that being said, probably not my favorite, but I've seen worse, and it could have been a lot worse. So I'll stick with that.
This is like, if you have kids of a very particular age, where you need something with a little bit of teeth but not too many, it's a good choice. I want to push, but like, I think the thing about horror being for kids, I think that's true historically, like, our teenagers more specifically, maybe. I think in recent years, the past decade, in many cases, that's stopped. That's not necessarily the case as much. I mean, the Insidious movies or the Sinister ones and all that shit is still for kids. But, like,
Annabelle, kids love those Annabelle
But, like,
movies.
Nowadays you get pretty regularly, like, an Ari Aster or a David Eggers, or like, or even to some degree Jordan Peele, though I think that has more crossover. Like, I think you have more thoughtful horror movies nowadays than you did in the 80s or 90s, and a lot of them are either slow builds or slow burns, or even like the Babadook things, It Follows. Like, I think that these are, even to some degree, X has more on its mind than a horror movie in the 80s would.
These are all coming out from like one specific production company too. Like, I think these are all A24 movies is what you're talking about.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, not the Babadook and not like It Follows, but they do have, A24 does do a lot of these kind of things. But yeah, I do think it's becoming more common that, like, horror is about more than just scares and kills, and I think it's about, like, stuff that kids don't relate to or understand more often than it used to be. But at the same time, and I don't know, I think a lot of those movies would be very slow for teenagers, but
they're too cerebral.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, a lot of those movies that you mentioned are, like, a lot more cerebral than some of them have any right to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that Midsummer is like something a kid's gonna tuck into. Like, the scariest part of that movie is definitely the toxic relationship, not the location.
Yeah. Well, or Hereditary, for that matter.
Yeah, where it's the family dynamic.
Even
is
Hereditary
what's
has. Even Hereditary has a little bit more of the heebie-jeebies than Midsommar.
Yeah, but
does,
Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas still has scenes where guys get shot, you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean it's for kids.
Yeah, no, what I mean is that, like, Hereditary, I think, is more of a classic horror movie than Midsommar is. Midsummer's, if you told a kid this is a scary movie and showed them Midsommar, they're going to come out of you like, what the hell was that? That wasn't very scary. And maybe because, the sense of dread that the movie is trying to impose on you is going to go right over their head. Whereas a movie like Hereditary still has, like, the creepy witch ghosty stuff. So, like, that still kind of tracks. But I still think that even today, kids still, like, Haunting in Connecticut, they still love all those fucking Exorcist
Sure, there's plenty of that side of it too. Anyway, this is not as intense as like an Insidious or a Sinister, but it's more intense than like a Hocus Pocus or a Monster House. So for an exact age, you could do worse than this for like a bit of Halloween fare for like a tween-ish
for sure
kid.
Yeah. I would agree with pretty much all of that. I think that it's definitely something that would play well for a 13 or 14-year-old, where you don't want to put on something like Trick or Treat where there are boobs and things like that. But at the same time, you don't want to sit through something like Monster House. It's nice that it has a little bit of teeth. And heck, it might even have something there to get Grandpa screaming in the back because of Nixon or something like that, which is fine.
Who's a great man?
Oh, God. Just starts playing Southern Sun or whatever that was.
That's right.
Anyway, So I enjoy this movie more than I thought I would, and I completely forgot most of it when I suggested it again. I remembered a lot of the B stories again
forgot a
when I
lot
was
of it,
watching
too.
it. Yeah, so it's one of those things where I don't have clear memories of it when I'm not watching it, and I assume a couple years will go by, and I'll probably remember it being a little better than it was, and then watching it again and being like, nope, it's still just okay. So yeah, I would suggest this one's fine for Halloween. If you're just trying to watch something that's going to be cool and easy going at a party, because you can also throw it on in the background. There's nothing going to be that horrifying that anyone will actually want to stop what they're doing, but it'll be spooky.
And there's the horror scenes are pretty self-contained because it's a different monster each time. So
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I agree with everything that everybody said. So yeah, worth the time, but yeah, you could do better. But you could do worse. With that in mind, we are down to the voting of our Halloween theme. So let me give you a quick rundown of the points for you two at least. Boruff, you now have 12 points for final voting because you got a point from Zach about the political subtext around 2019 when this movie was made. And Boruff, you got a point from Zach Powers you got a point from Zach about the political subtext, and then Zach, you got a point about the whole Tolkien thing. So you have 14 points for final voting, and I have 11 points for final voting. So go ahead and do your calculus as you will, and let me know when you are ready.
okay.
Okay, I am done, and I don't have any little doodles this time, but
Okay. We've been talking about art so much now, Boruff. You're letting us down, man. You can't try to recreate some of those iconic
Fine.
covers?
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
just-
good. I think I'm as good as I'm gonna get for this.
Oh.
may I
Okay.
make it?
Alrighty, Chris. So what have you got for Steven Spielberg's Monster House?
Monster House can go number 2 itself.
Okay. I gave Monster House a number 2 as well.
I gave Monster House a trace.
3. Alrighty. So that is a mighty 7 for Monster House. So next up is Zach's pick of Trick or Treat. Chris Boruff, what have you got?
I'm gonna give it a 6 because I think it was pretty good.
Okay, I think I know where this is going because I too gave Trick or Treat a 6. And if Zach could be so kind,
I almost wish I gave it a 6, but I gave it a 7.
He had so many points to deal with. You know, I get it.
Yeah.
All right. So that pretty much seals the deal, but we'll get through the final voting here. That puts Trick or Treat at 19 points. So, Chris Boruff, what have you got? Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
I gave Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark a 4 for okay quality entertainment.
Sure. Yeah, I gave Stories to Tell in the Dark a 3, mainly just because that's all the points I could give it. I would probably give it another more if I did, but I thought Trick or Treat was pretty much a home run.
I gave it a 4. If I could go back in time, you know what? I'd give this a 5 and Trick or Treat a 6, and give the 666. But I was kind of on the fence, you know.
Yeah, it's
I mean, I still got
wins.
a point I can give you to make it be a 6.
That one, you'd have to take a point away from. It doesn't solve the problem.
Gentlemen, we're not doing a recount, okay? This is over.
It would have the
This is
same
over.
winner either way.
That's right.
Okay.
We're
So,
not
that's
accepting
that.
absentee ballots.
That's
Okay, so congratulations, Zach. You have won the Halloween theme with Trick or Treat. So, real quick before we get to our Christmas episode, what do you want to announce your bonus movie, or do you want to withhold it?
I think I was thinking about it today, and I kind of decided on the fly. I was thinking, I was making my little cards and writing the names of the movies, and I was like, Trick or Treat with the big old R in the middle. You know what? I want to watch another movie with some R's in it. How about R?
Nice. Cool. You know, I've been meaning to see that because I've heard it's pretty good.
Yeah, let's clean the Indian sort of Bollywood thing. We haven't done that before. I think
So
it will be.
we're watching the movie R.
RRR.
Okay.
Have you not heard of RRR?
I think I have heard of it. I don't think I've seen it. Is this the one
It's
with
an
the
Indian movie.
action-packed?
Yeah, it's an
I've
Indian
seen
film.
GIFs of it, I think.
Okay, it was a
It
big
came
very
out-
last
Came
year.
out
I
this
think
year, didn't it?
it's
Last
on
year?
Netflix or something already. It's streaming already. It's free. It shouldn't be any trouble to find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a movie?
RRR. 3 R's is the name of the movie.
Okay. It's not a horror movie though, right?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. Yeah, and it's your bonus movie. You could do whatever you want.
Halloween's long over when we're recording this.
That's
so
right. That's
we can
right.
dispense.
That's right.
I mean, we've been a little loosey-goosey with the time period. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But
it's
we're going
fine.
to do Christmas now, right?
That's
We are
right.
going to move straight to Christmas.
That's right. So we have Zach, why don't you just run through our Christmas, how we're
Okay,
going
so
to do
we're going to
this
do
Christmas
this the same way we do it every year. We each select 2 possible Christmas movies to watch, and then we will roll a 6-sided die in the spirit of Christmas to
Craps.
to figure out which one we're going to watch. The first 2 choices are Chris's picks. The second 2 are Russell's picks, and the last 2 are my picks. So we have 6 on the docket this time. If it comes up at number 1, we are going to be watching Black Christmas 1974. Number 2, Die Hard from 1988. Number 3 will be Jingle All the Way. Number 4 will be Elf. Number 5 will be 2019's Little Women. Number 6, 1974's Black Christmas yet
We're
again.
going to get it this time, boys.
You even had
alright,
the one
Zach.
where you could force us to watch it. We're going to find out.
So are you ready for the big roll?
Let's do it.
1, 2, 3. Elf. Elf is the victor.
Hey, considering the other choice, you guys got off easy.
I mean, I haven't seen Elf, so yeah.
You haven't? Oh, wow. Okay. Huh.
I've seen bits of
alright.
it. It's one of those ones where it's
Okay.
always on TV, but I've never actually
Sure.
seen the whole thing. It's just been background
Okay.
noise, and it's going to become the whole show, so I'll give it a shot.
All right.
Black
yeah,
Christmas fades us for another fucking year. If Russell had made his second choice Black Christmas, we wouldn't
We'd be
be
watching Jingle All the Way, buddy. You know that's what would happen. We'd be watching Jingle All the Way. If I had chose Black
Little
Christmas,
Women.
it would have totally gone to Jingle All the Way. Even Little Women, I'd be like, okay, at least, woo, dodged a bullet there. I kind of added that poison pill of Jingle All the Way with Sinbad and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So,
I
no, I'm
legitimately-
surprised you haven't seen
yeah.
it.
I'm glad that we're doing that and not Die Hard. I've seen Die Hard too many times. It's a great movie, but too many times. Let's see what Elf's about. I haven't seen it.
I
Let's
hear
see
ya.
what it's about.
Interesting. Alrighty. Well, join us next time for the holiday magic that is Elf. And we'll be watching that movie. This is just our fun sort of Christmas gift to all of you, or whatever holiday you choose to celebrate during
There's
the
no
winter
bonus, there's no
solstice.
nothing. It's just us
Yeah,
talking
it's
about
just,
a movie.
just us doing it for fun, much like we do all the time. So, with that in mind, fellas, it's been a ball, and we will see you next time. I have been Russell Carlson, and I have been joined by Chris Boruff.
Take it easy, everybody. I can't remember anything from the movie.
And I've also been joined by Zach Powers.
The true scary story is the Richard Nixon administration.
The spookiest monster of them all. Alrighty, and as we always say here on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom.
Are you shitting me?